Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. How I Uncovered a Chinese Stock Scam. I'm a first-generation girl born in the U.S. to Chinese immigrants. I broke all cultural boundaries by marrying a black male in college whose name is Fred. Fred and I had a finance class together and he was really persistent in asking me out on a date. We got married in 2008, which was about the same time a lot of Chinese companies were taken off on Wall Street. Now in 2010, the Chinese companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange are worth a fortune. My parents were from the remote Henan province in China. During the Chinese New Year, Fred and I went to visit my parents' apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I was talking about a Chinese company that I researched, which sold paper in the province of Henan, whose financials had them listed as bringing in over $100 million in profits each year. My father almost spit out his tea when I told him that figure. My father said in a thick Chinese accent, "That company don't make 100 million yen in 1 year. They lie." I responded, "How do you know that, father?" Quote. My father responded, "I worked for that company when I lived in Henan. They only had one truck with a large factory that had old machines. Not possible to grow that big since I leave. The area is too poor." Fred and I looked at each other in amazement. Fred said, "What if the company is a big fake? How can we expose the company and make money off it?" Quote. My father responded, "It's very, very difficult to get money information in China. They kill you if they find out you go snooping around." Quote. I then said, "Who's they, father? The Chinese government?" Quote. My father responded, "Yes. It's not like here. You can't do whatever you want there. They kill you or they put you away." Fred and I eventually said goodbye to my parents and we headed back to our home in Queens, New York. Fred and I brainstormed in the car. Fred said, "Perhaps your father knows something that no other American knows. What if the Chinese company is a complete fraud? Let's research the company more." Quote. What I found out was the Chinese company had partnered with a company that was basically defunct in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The company in Scranton, which formerly went by as Lackawanna Coal and Fuel, was once a large producer of fuel-related products. But its mines had laid dormant for years. But they were still listed on the stock market. Chinese companies can't legally trade on Wall Street. So they partnered with Lackawanna Coal and Fuel, and changed their name to Global Paper Products. Fred and I were stunned when we learned more and more about the Chinese practices. We both were joking and I said, "Americans are trusting these Chinese companies to submit accurate accounting information. But in reality it could all be a big scam. The feds can't arrest Chinese nationalists living in China. Because they have no jurisdiction in China. The Chinese people who start these fraudulent businesses have nothing to lose and they could make hundreds of millions of dollars by selling their inflated stocks." Fred then said, "What if we go to Henan, China to scope out the factory and see how much paper they are actually producing?" Quote. Then I said, "Okay. Then what do we do? Make a short position sale?" Quote. Fred responded, "Exactly. Global Paper Products is currently trading at over $100 a share. We go to Henan, China and get as much evidence as possible to expose the company and sit on that information. Then we approach potential investors in the United States, who will hopefully give us money to invest in a short position sale, where we borrow thousands of stocks in Global Paper Products from a large brokerage firm. Then we cash out the stocks for over $100 a share. Then we go to the feds and the media and expose the information we uncovered in Henan. So then when the company gets close to going bankrupt and the stocks are worth mere pennies, then we buy back and return the stocks that we borrowed from the brokerage firm for pennies on the dollar. I responded, wow, there's a lot of money to be made in this scheme. We should probably convince my father to go to Henan with us, and then either him or I then try to get a job at the factory. Fred responded, yes, that sounds like a plan. But remember what your father said with snooping around in China. That all of us will be putting our lives in danger if we go to China and try to get information about the factory. I said, let's approach my parents this weekend and see what their thoughts are. Quote. Fred responded, okay. The weekend came and I sat my parents down. We explained the whole situation to them and the potential money that could be made. My parents deliberated in Chinese, which I could understand. But Fred could not. Chinese culture is big on honesty and honor. So this would go against my parents' mindset. But I stressed to them the paper factory in China are the ones who are being dishonest. My parents eventually agreed to partake in our scheme. My father's plan was to get me a job in the factory with local connections that he hoped he still had. I would make essentially 5 cents an hour. But the information I would learn about the internal processes of the factory would be invaluable. Fred and my parents would monitor the exterior of the factory to see how many trucks were coming and going from the factory. Fred and I were granted a leave of absence from our finance jobs, and my parents got rid of their apartment to help save money. If we were wrong on this, then we would be essentially in debt for a very long time. But on the flip side, we could become virtual millionaires. Regardless, we were all putting ourselves in danger from the Chinese government. So any information we obtained would have to be done with extreme caution. The 4 of us paid a total of about $6,000 to get to the Henan province. My grandparents were still living there, so we made arrangements for the 4 of us to stay in my father's parents-in-law's suite. My Chinese family members were baffled about us wanting to live in Henan. But nonetheless, they were happy to see us. After spending 2 days in Henan, my father took me over to the factory. The grounds of the factory were huge, about the size of a NYC block. The factory complex was surrounded by a gate. At the front of the gate there was a guard. My father recognized the guard, and the 2 of them shook hands like they were longtime friends. My father explained to the guard that I needed a job. The guard said the foreman of the factory's name, and my father also knew that person when he heard the name. My father called the foreman from the guard shack, and the 2 of them were really friendly with each other on the phone. The foreman agreed to hire me and said for me to come back tomorrow. My father said that I would be doing laborer work. My father explained that they will hire you in China, but if you can't do the work or if you get hurt, then they'll just let you go. So I knew I was going to break my back doing this job. But I knew I was doing it for the shortest time possible in order to get information about the factory. The 4 of us prepped for the next day. I was scared out of my mind. My father told me to dress like a peasant and don't talk, because I will sound too intelligent and they will be suspicious of my US accent. We agreed to use my cell phone to take videos and photos only in situations that I knew were safe. I wouldn't do that for the first week. I would learn my job and the factory at first. Then I would start getting information. The next day came and I walked to the entrance to the factory. I was shaking the whole time. I thought to myself, what if they already knew that I was essentially a spy? The guard let me in and directed me towards the entrance door to the factory. As I walked to the entrance, I was impressed on how well the grounds were maintained and by the aesthetic art sculptures that were dispersed around the factory grounds. I was starting to have doubts that maybe this factory is actually legit and not a scam. As I approached the entrance, the foreman was there waiting for me. He said in Chinese, "You must be Lin." Quote. I responded back, "Yes," and he told me his name was Chen. I didn't say anything but yes or no. I didn't want people to hear my American accent or come across as being too sophisticated. He had me fill out some forms. One of them was about a strict confidentiality code the factory had, about not taking pictures or videos. I signed all the forms, then Chen took me for a tour of the factory. The first thing that stood out was how massive the building was inside. It reminded me of 5 Home Depot stores combined. The next thing that stood out was how old the equipment was in the factory. The equipment must have been from the World War II era. Most of the equipment was not being utilized for some unknown reason. Perhaps the machines were inoperable from being so old. The next thing that I noticed was that I didn't see no more than 4 employees working in the factory. Though I was nervous beyond belief. I couldn't see how this run-down factory could generate $100 million a year. Chen showed the rear entrance that was filled with old paper recyclables. There were multiple mounds. The mounds looked like a junkyard. From the tutorial I got from Chen, it seemed like the recyclable paper products go into one machine to be broken down to a pulp like paste. Then the pulp is fed into a machine, where it eventually is turned into big rolls of paper. My job was to clean the floor from the recyclable waste that was inadvertently dropped by the one backhoe that the factory owned and also assist the other factory workers as needed. Chen told me to stay busy and don't be caught sitting around. So I was handed a broom and I started to work. I put my head down most of the time while I would occasionally look up to see how much paper was actually being produced. I worked all day. The work was harder than it looked. I swept, then helped one of the laborers with the machine, then I swept again. I did this all day. At 5 p.m. the factory stopped. There was only 2 rolls of paper that was produced since I got there. Granted, the rolls were huge, but I couldn't see the rolls being worth no more than $100 each. So either this factory was a scam or this was a really slow day. I thought about it and I said to myself, there is no way the math adds up and there is no room for slow days when a factory would need to produce approximately $300,000 worth of paper a day to match the accounting figures the company released. I walked home and told my parents and Fred about the internal operations. Everyone was delighted to hear my news. We all thought it would be best to start external surveillance of the factory right away. So my father and Fred would monitor the front and rear gates tomorrow to see how many trucks were coming and going. Based on the information I gave them, everyone thought it would be best for me to start secretly recording tomorrow just in case I got terminated. Then we would have lost our opportunity. Tomorrow came around and as I was let into the front gate I pretended to be texting on my phone. But instead I was filming as I was walking. I filmed as I entered the factory entrance. Then I stopped. I was shaking beyond belief. I had no idea if the factory had hidden cameras that could be potentially watching me. I had that unnerving feeling that the workers knew what I was doing. I waited an hour until everyone was busy. Then I hid my phone and pressed play on the video to start recording. I positioned the phone higher up to get an overview of the factory and the old derelict equipment. About 15 minutes later, I brought my phone outside to video the mounds of recyclable paper they had. The company's financials had listed $20 million in raw materials on the factory grounds. I jokingly thought to myself that if these recyclable garbage mounds, which were made up of mostly cardboard, are worth $20 million, then New York has hundreds of millions of dollars laying around on the streets each day. I felt satisfied with the video I had from today, that I would look at later with Fred and my parents. I worked the rest of the day and was able to stop at 5 p.m. I walked home and showed the videos to the three of them. We were all in amazement that the four of us, who were very ordinary people, were unraveling a complete scam that was bilking people out of millions of dollars in worthless stocks. My father and Fred were secretly filming from a distance as well, and they didn't see one truck leave the factory all day. We all agreed to continue filming and upload our videos onto the laptop we had, where we backed up the information on flash drives. We did this every day, Monday through Saturday. I couldn't allow myself to forget that I was in China, and if anyone caught me secretly filming, then I would potentially be disposed of. The four factory workers would make unwanted advances on me, and I would take advantage of this opportunity by secretly filming them as they talked about their responsibilities in the factory. The days turned into weeks, and I knew I was almost finished with gathering all the information I needed. We all came to the conclusion that since I've been working at the factory there wasn't $100,000 worth of paper made. Today is Wednesday and Friday is going to be my last day. I put the camera in a different location today. I stupidly didn't take into account that one of the workers who was stalking me watched me as I put my phone down and then walk away. As I walked away from my phone, the worker walked towards my phone and yelled out loud in Chinese, "Lin, you forgot your phone." As he picked up my phone, he could tell the phone was video recording. The worker looked perplexed, like he knew something wasn't right. So I had to think fast. I walked towards him and started to hug him and said in Chinese, "Stupid me, how can I be so stupid?" Quote. Then I flirted with him like he was a hero. I think I got him to forget that I was videotaping the factory, because I asked him to take me out to dinner on Saturday. I was now petrified beyond belief. I was paranoid that the foreman was going to take my phone and see the videos that I had taken today. Luckily that didn't happen, and I left at 5 p.m. for the day. There was no way I was going back to the factory. We had a boatload of evidence, and I didn't want to jeopardize everything by going back to the factory and potentially being exposed. We decided that we were all going to leave to go back to the United States tomorrow. Fred and I encrypted the information on the laptops and flash drives in case we got searched at the airport. The next day we said our goodbyes to my extended family, then we headed towards the airport. We weren't overly scrutinized or searched, and we kept the laptops as carry-ons. When we got back home, Fred and I compiled the video evidence we had to show the overwhelming evidence we had compiled. So the investors in turn would give us money to buy into a short position sale in stocks. The caveat was that we couldn't give away the factory or the province in China we were in, because we didn't want the investors to ditch us and do it on their own. With that said, we were able to approach 5 investors who we had connections with as brokers, who gave us a total of $16 million to invest with a 30% return to them. Each investor we approached were in absolute shock and awe as we unfolded the schemes that the Chinese businesses were partaking in. So we opened an account with the Charles Schwab brokerage firm, and they were happy to take our $16 million as collateral. Then we opened a margin account and borrowed against the $16 million to buy the Global Paper Products stocks from them at $110 a share, which came out to approximately 146,000 shares of Global Paper Products. With our purchase alone, we lifted the stock up to $120 a share. We waited the required 3 days, then we cashed out the value of the stocks into a different banking account, which was approximately $16 million. We made a written agreement with the Charles Schwab brokerage firm that we would return the 146,000 shares within a year. So we started our smear campaign against Global Paper Products right away. We made a video and uploaded it online. We met with the feds and we met with every media outlet company that would interview us. We also strongly advised our family members in Henan to move to the United States, which we would help pay for, so they wouldn't have to suffer retaliation from the Chinese government. It took less than a month before all the major media outlets and even the Wall Street Journal started to question the Chinese business practices as a whole. There was so much negative media attention that Global Paper Products received from all the evidence we provided, and because of that they received the brunt of the investor skepticism, which shrunk their stock price to $5 a share. We bought back approximately 146,000 in stocks at $5 a share and returned the shares to the Charles Schwab brokerage firm, which came out to be around $730,000. Charles Schwab gave us our $16 million back we used as collateral minus their commission and fees, which was only about $100,000. Our investors received their $16 million back and plus their 30% commission, which came out to be around $5 million. So with the investors' commission and brokerage fees, we were able to still make a profit close to $11 million. Charles Schwab alleged insider trading to the feds against us out of spite, which eventually the feds cleared us. The only drawback was that me, Fred and my parents had to move and essentially change our identities because of the countless threats we received from the Chinese nationalist. As I sit on my mansion's balcony overlooking the ocean in St. Thomas with Fred, who I now goes by as Kevin, and my parents, we all joke how 4 simple people became multi-millionaires in less than a year by doing something that many other people could have done. We are even thinking about starting our own company to expose other businesses in China. But right now it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and I just want to finish my frozen daiquiri that our butler brought me. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.